Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my partner in everything Packers, Wes Hodkiewicz. Coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. And, Wes, we have a lot of ground to cover on this show because it is week 2 already in the NFL. It is a short week for the Packers, so we kind of have to cram 2 shows into one here, which is to review week 1 and preview week 2. So we'll jump right into the 27-13 victory over the Lions at Lambeau Field to open the 2025 season. And when you talk about this game, I think it starts with the performance by the Packers defense.
So this is a big game on Thursday night against the Washington Commanders.
Yes, it is.
And we will obviously get into that. We'll talk about it. Everyone's going to want to turn the page. Take a moment to enjoy this win for the Packers over the Detroit Lions, though, because there were so many things in play here for Green Bay. The fact that they did go 1-5 against the NFC North last year. The fact that they have had some troubles here the past few seasons with the Detroit Lions. But this game in particular, I thought, and I think I wrote it, I can't remember if I kept it in my inbox or not, but I'm going to say it now.
Okay.
One of the most impressive victories, I think, in the post-Aaron Rodgers era, the Jordan Love era, because Green Bay, on both sides of the ball and special teams, but on offense and defense, imposed its will against a team that had been known for its physicality. If you look at that defensive performance, as you outlined, everybody was questioning whether or not they could stop the run without Kenny Clark. What was going to happen in that capacity? Detroit has 46 rushing yards. People were wondering, okay, what is Micah Parsons going to bring to this place? In addition to the fact that he had this overwhelming ovation at the start of the football game, the last guy out of the tunnel.
Yep.
Micah Parsons comes in the game and gets a pressure on his first snap. Every single one of his plays was impactful. It affected the game in some shape or fashion, but the 3 pressures, a 2-yard check down for a loss,
Yep.
a sack, and an interception for Evan Williams. I want to just make this real quick point, and then you can take it wherever you want to go. His chasing down of Jared Goff, I understand there's a lot of haters out there from Dallas. They're like, well, it was in the fourth quarter, the game was in hand. Him chasing down Jared Goff was a moment more than it was just a play.
Yeah.
That's the type of thing that you make NFL Films highlight reels out of. And for Packer fans, the way they responded to that, the way the Packers sideline responded to it, Michael, this was a very important game. 17 more weeks, 16 more games, trying to win a Super Bowl here. But in terms of making a first impression, by golly, the Micah Parsons era got off to a good start.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned those other plays before you mentioned the sack that Parsons got, because his impact on this game was undeniable, even though he technically didn't have a tackle or a sack on the stat sheet until late in the ball game. And I like what you said as well about that sack, the chasing down of Goff being a moment, because you expected the crowd to react that way. But when you look at the replay of that, look at how that Packers sideline reacted. They knew that he had a big-time impact in that game in his limited snaps in a part-time role in this game. But every single guy on that sideline also wanted him to have his moment in his debut in Green Bay in front of the home fans. It was important. And for this defense collectively, because this really was about the collective, it was shutting down that 2-headed monster of Gibbs and Montgomery. It was not allowing Jared Goff to even challenge the Packers downfield with the passing game. I mean, other than a couple catches by Sam Laporta with a little bit of coverage bust in there, there just wasn't a threat downfield. Jared Goff was just playing dink and dunk and check down the entire game. He completed over 30 passes in the game and barely got over 200 yards. The collective, I mean, to hold the number 1 scoring offense in the league last year out of the end zone for 59 minutes out of the 60 minutes of this game was a remarkable and an impressive effort. And you can't say enough. You can't say enough about how the Packers defense came to play in this ballgame.
No, and it was immediate. And, I was talking with Kobe Wooden in the locker room afterwards. I was talking to a lot of guys, and the Packers defense, you can tell there's a chip on its shoulder because, yes, Micah Parsons is a really good football player, one of the very best defenders in this league. But Packers defense felt like it was pretty good too, even before that trade. And whatever the outside noise was about, how this was going to affect their run game, or what the domino effect was, or how the cornerbacks were going to react now that Jair Alexander's gone and Nate Hobbs is there and Hobbs isn't active for this game. I feel like last year everybody took for granted the fact that Jeff Hafley adapted so well to what the circumstances were with injuries, with what the strengths were of his players, to be able to maneuver around and change the chessboard and ultimately have the defense they did. But then you see a game like this and you realize when they have more of those guys available, when you have Lucas Van Ness in year 3 doing some inside concepts on passing downs, Rashawn Gary was exceptional in this game too, creating some of his own plays and also showing at times what he can do when he gets one-on-ones. There's a quote that Tucker Kraft said afterwards, because we were talking about the magnitude of the victory, and he said, I'd never beaten the Lions at Lambeau Field. Michael, there was a time where the Packers beat the Lions 24 straight years at Lambeau Field.
Right.
And there's a new generation of Packer players that hadn't experienced that yet because of the trajectory that the Lions had been on and the Packers being a young football team. They were hungry, and there was a fire in their belly to meet that challenge, I think, on both sides of the ball. But defensively, after what the Lions did last season and how efficient they were to completely rattle them and take Goff out of his game, to stop the running game, to really minimize the impact of Amon-Ra St. Brown, that was probably the most encouraging thing of all. It showed that the Packers aren't just a team that's going to be able to win here in the NFC North and hopefully make another playoff run, but this was a statement victory that they are one of these top teams in this conference.
Yeah, I thought Jared Goff never looked particularly comfortable in the pocket in this game, and that's saying something based on how those 2 games against the Lions went last year, when it looked like he wasn't bothered by anything. And I honestly thought when Micah Parsons was in the game, it sort of looked like Jared Goff kind of had his eye on Parsons. His eyes were almost dropping to where Parsons might have been coming from, in the pass rush. Those types of things are such a switch from when the Packers faced the Lions last year. The other thing I really liked about couple other things I really liked about this defensive effort is when in reviewing the film of this game, you look at the plays that Parsons was not on the field. The front 4, and there were some rotations, but the front 4 the Packers generally went with was Van Ness and Gary on the edges and Devontae Wyatt and Colby Wooden as the interior tackles. And that front 4, every single one of those guys had multiple moments, multiple areas of impact. I thought probably the 2 guys that stood out the most, and this is hard to say, when Rashawn Gary had maybe the most important sack of the game, being back by the goal line, which then set up the touchdown to seal the game. But the 2 that jumped out at me the most on the film in terms of the volume of plays where they showed up were Wooden and Van Ness. And we saw Colby Wooden have his best training camp in his 3-year NFL career to date, and it's tremendous to see that carry over right away into the first game of the season. And then Lucas Van Ness, this is a young man who's, you can see it, he's just starting to come into his own, right? And he's been under a lot of pressure. He's taken a lot of heat for being a first-round pick and not having that impact in the first 2 years that everybody hopes from a first-round pick and all that. He's had to wear that. He's had to deal with it. He's also had to fight through some injuries. He's had to, he's been a pro about it all the way along, and this is a young guy who's not going to stand in front of the cameras and say, I told you so or anything like that. But the combination, Lucas Van Ness with Rashawn Gary, with Micah Parsons, and maybe where this thing is going defensively is really exciting.
Yeah, and Parsons put a pretty lofty comparison out there with Van Ness, saying that he's told him that he could be a Cameron Wake, a Julius Peppers type, and obviously that goes without saying. I mean, those are, especially in Peppers' case, I mean, that's one of the best players of his generation. But,
right.
But again, as I wrote in our Insider Inbox column, you can see what he's referring to, though, because this was the first game where we got to really see Lucas Van Ness rushing inside in some of these third down passing situations. They called the package cheetah. It has a lot of parallels to what Dom Capers was doing with NASCAR in the mid-2010s, where you're rushing your outside linebackers at the edges, but then you're also having a third one pump inside at the 3-tech position, and that's where Van Ness ended up getting his half sack from in this game. And that was what was sort of a staple for Julius Peppers when he was here. They call it the elephant at first when he got here in 2014, where those early downs he's outside, and then when it comes to third downs, a lot of times he's going to be at the 3-tech, and they had Mike Neal or Nick Perry at the other edge rushing.
And we saw Mike Pettin do it with Zadarius Smith as well
Yeah.
in 2019 when he first got here and all that. So it's certainly something we've seen before, but with a young player, with a third-year guy, and a guy who who seems to be really making the progress that the Packers are hoping for, it looks really promising for number 90 out there.
Yeah, it does, and still 24 and still a lot in front of him right now, but Green Bay has all these outside linebackers right now. Now, we'll have to see exactly what happens with Brenton Cox Jr. He left with a groin injury, but Barron Sorrell's coming back from the knee. There's 6 outside linebackers on this roster for Green Bay at the moment, and you have Colin Oliver on the PUP list, the 5th-round pick out of Oklahoma State. So a multitude of guys that can be utilized, but the body types just span the entire horizon here, where you have guys like Oliver and Parsons who are more in that 250 range, and guys like Gary and Van Ness that are pushing 275, 280. So a lot of different ways you can use them. But I think the most encouraging thing is seeing how they were used in tandem, right? Where you had Devontae Wyatt get involved with the pass rush game, and then obviously, as you already alluded to, Colby Wooden being the guy that kind of took over those early down snaps that Kenny Clark was seeing.
Yeah, well, a couple of statistics to talk about that on the defensive side that really illustrated how this went, and then we'll obviously move on to some other things. But red zone, Packers got 2 stops in the red zone that forced field goals, and then another stop in the red zone with Evan Williams' interception, which came off of the Parsons pressure. And obviously, stopping the Lions in the red zone had been an issue for a couple of years here for Green Bay. So that was big. The other thing, and I've actually got a whole statistical analysis of this up on Packers.com today if you want to check it out, that Gibbs-Montgomery running back duo, they touched the ball 34 times in this game. And in those 34 touches, they did not get to 100 yards. They had 93 yards on 34 touches. That's a 2.7 average, Wes. And I look back, Gibbs and Montgomery last year for the number 1 scoring offense in the league, in combining for over 3,000 yards from scrimmage, the two of them, they averaged 5.8 yards every time they touched the ball. The Packers held them to less than half of that, 2.7, when they got the ball on 34 out of 65 plays. They got the ball on more than half of Detroit's plays, and their output was less than half of what they're accustomed to. I mean, so that numbers-wise, that just illustrates what the Packers did defensively, and there were 6 tackles for loss against those 2 running backs, against Gibbs and Montgomery in this game. But we also need to talk about the offense, because we talked about it, LaFleur talked about it, the players talked about it in the locker room, getting off to a fast start. And the Packers lost the coin toss. The Lions decided to defer. They gave the Packers the ball first, and Jordan Love and company went 83 yards down the field for an opening touchdown, and then continued that by tacking on a field goal and then a quick strike touchdown. 17 points in the first 3 possessions to take control of this game. That type of fast start is exactly what the Packers were looking for, and they got it.
And 9 different players caught a pass in those drives.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best offense and plan is the one in which you've mastered, right, for a number of years now. And this has been one of the big strengths of this Green Bay offense for so long, even though now you do add Matthew Golden into the mix, and Luke Musgrave is back. Multitude of different ways you can take this thing. The Josh Jacobs factor, I thought, was the main headline on the offensive side of the ball, and we were talking with him in the locker room afterwards. I mean, that the Detroit Lions are historically going to be a team that wants to try to play that single high look. I thought they put that on the extreme in this matchup. They were doing everything they could with loading the box early on to stop Josh Jacobs.
They were selling out. They were selling out against the run. There's no doubt.
And really putting it on Jordan Love and the receivers to take it. And they did. I mean, with Jacobs only having 8 rushing yards in the first half, this thing came down to Jordan Love converting some 3rd and long situations early, and they came through. I don't know, this is such a small thing, but did you get a chance to watch? There's been some clips on Twitter. That first big passing play, the 20-yarder to Romeo Doubs.
Romeo?
Did you see the pass protection on that?
Oh, yeah.
I'm telling you this right now, folks. Chris Brooks is going to play in the National Football League for a long, long time if he's healthy. I've never seen anything like this before, where he not only picks up the linebacker who's blitzing, he ends up getting the stunt picked up too.
Right.
How many running backs can do that? They had their edge rusher running a stunt, and Josh Brooks stands up to it, and because of the way that the defense was orientated, Jordan Love had all day to find Romeo Doubs. Mm-hmm. So to go 12 plays, 83 yards, you have the little extracurricular stuff that happens at the end of the drive where Brian Branch rips off Tucker Kraft's helmet in the middle of an engaged block, whips it to the sideline, and 3 plays later, Kraft catches one of the most beautiful pass and catch combinations you're going to see down the seam in the National Football League.
Yeah.
Completely undeterred, Kraft comes through with that ball, and the Packers were off to the races, and then that's only rivaled by the 58 or the 48-yarder that Romeo Doubs had down the field, where, again, 2 defensive backs closing in on him. He makes the catch. A Packers receiving corps that had to answer a lot of questions after some of the drop issues last year really came through big in this one.
Yeah, well, you want to know the confidence that Matt LaFleur has in his quarterback and in this offense. Right after the Detroit Lions take almost 10 minutes off the clock. It's a 10-0 game. The Lions take almost 10 minutes off the clock, methodically marching down the field. The Packers get the stop in the red zone, make them kick the field goal. It's 10-3. Is Matt LaFleur worried about giving his defense a rest? Nah. No. It's play action, take the shot downfield to Romeo, 48 yards. And then the very next play is the 17-yard touchdown to Jaden Reed off the rub route. Dontavian Wicks gets the assist for the screen. Not making contact with the defender, by the way. Yep. He did that absolutely textbook. Jaden Reed catches it. So 2 plays, 65 yards right after the Lions had gotten within 10-3. That makes it 17-3, and the Lions never made it a 1-score game again the rest of the way. Basically, from that middle of the second quarter, the rest of the way, the Packers had a multi-score lead. I thought Jordan Love was efficient and effective. A couple of plays there in the second half where he put the ball in harm's way. Fortunately, Anzalone dropped the one, and then the other one was wiped out by a penalty. Unfortunately, that interception was the play that hurt Zach Tom.
Yeah.
And we don't know his availability on a short week for Thursday. He's listed with an oblique injury. It was announced as a hip injury. Officially on the injury report, it's listed as an oblique injury. So we'll see if Tom can be out there. He was replaced by the newcomer on the offensive line, Darian Kennard, for the rest of the third and fourth quarters there. Packers also lost left guard Aaron Banks to an ankle injury. He got rolled up on. I saw it on the film. He got rolled up on Jacobs' touchdown run, the one that put the Packers up 24-6 there. He was replaced by Jordan Morgan, the first-round pick from last year. He went into left guard to replace Banks. So we'll see the status of the Packers' offensive line. But for as much as Josh Jacobs struggled running the ball in the first half with just the 8 yards on 6 carries, Jacobs was a stud in pass protection, just as Chris Brooks was. Those two guys put on an absolute clinic in terms of how to pick up blitzes and how to protect your quarterback. And then Jacobs was able to grind out 58 yards in the second half, which is pretty good production in 2 quarters against that Detroit defense. So I thought all in all, when it was all said and done, when you look at the opponent that you were playing, I thought the Packers offense had a pretty darn good, solid day.
That was a great sign, too, for Jacobs, because if you remember from last year, he was one of the league leaders, if not the league leader, in first half rushing yards. But sometimes the second half was tougher for the Packers to get their running game going. This game was the polar opposite, where once Detroit started finally having to respect the pass, that's where Jacobs started to eat on the looks that he was getting in the second half. And he got some well-earned, hard-earned yards as well. I really liked the response there, where you have the sack by Gary, you have nobody blocking Colby Wooden at all, and him getting, it was funny, he said his coach, DeMarcus Covington even says usually, don't sleep on the easy, like basically the easy plays. Like when they're there, you got to make those too.
Yeah.
And he did in that case, and was a 1-yard tackle for loss. So Jack Fox has to kick out of his own end zone, and Jaden Reed takes it back 20 yards to the 36, and it was all Josh Jacobs after that. It was boom, 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 downhill running the entire way, and they end up getting in the end zone. Those are, again, it just shows you the various ways that the Packers can beat you, right? And moving the chains, I just felt like by and large, Green Bay is a more explosive offense than Detroit. Detroit, as much as we kind of talk about the checkdowns, this is the way they run offense, right? It's not a surprise that Gibbs and Montgomery touched the ball 34 times. What's a surprise is they had 93 total yards on it.
Right, exactly.
But they are going to try to wear you down and get to the sticks and run some slants and try to make big plays happen and basically wait for you to have a breakdown like they did with the Sam Laporta completions.
Yeah.
But by and large, Green Bay's offense, there's just so much more offensive firepower to it. And I felt like in this game, when you have that type of explosive potential mixed with protecting the football well, it allows you to accomplish what Green Bay accomplished. I must say this, though, because I want to make sure I get the stat right. This is one of the things you're very rarely going to see, but it just shows you the way that this game went. 35-25 to 24-35 in total time of possession. Almost 10 more minutes of total possession for the Lions. But Green Bay's defense just did not give up.
Yeah.
They did not wear down. And even the pass rush, you can make a case that being able to work some of those rotations allowed them to stay fresh.
Yeah, a couple other things I need to say before we move on. We both mentioned the 48-yard pass, the big bomb down the field to Romeo Doubs, the longest catch of his career to date, by the way, which is a nice accomplishment for him. But you know how he got so open on that play? It's because the safety bit down on the crossing route by Matthew Golden.
Yeah.
Matthew Golden had multiple guys on him on the crossing route, and then Romeo's open on the deep one because the other guy coming from the backside was way too far away. Couldn't help out the corner there.
In all that consternation about Jordan Love's hand and everything like that, he goes under center, runs a play action, and whips that ball out there too.
And we did all this talking about the defense, and we barely mentioned Quay Walker and Edgerrin Cooper, who were absolutely all over the field. I mean, it was just fun to watch. I mean, number 7, number 56, those guys were flying around. They were being kept clean by the guys in front of them, but then they were also dodging the blockers. I mean, you could when the Lions' new center, Graham Glasgow, he keeps trying to get to the second level to block one of those guys, and they just go around him. They make him miss. It was extremely frustrating for the Lions, and Cooper and Walker had a lot to do with that. And then the guy who got the new contract, the punter, Daniel Whelan, I mean, you could hear the gasps in the crowd when he boomed those couple of punts. I mean, my goodness. Now, obviously, early in the season when the weather is like that, we're not surprised because we watched it all through training camp. That's what Whelan looks like, certainly this time of year. But man, talk about walking out there after signing your brand new contract and showing what you're worth.
He hits such a beautiful ball, too. It almost looks like an Aaron Rodgers Hail Mary, the way he hits those footballs.
That's a good comparison.
I mean, like the spin on it.
Yeah.
When he's really going after it, he's not Aussie styling it. Like when he's really getting after it. There was that one where, I mean, it flipped the entire field.
Yep.
And it's something when you get a 14-yard return, I think Detroit had on that. But he kicked it so far, I think the net was still almost 50 yards.
Yeah.
Just based on how far he took it. Now, this is what Green Bay's been building towards. They saw what it looked like when they don't have their kicker right, when they don't have their long snapper right, when they don't have their punter right. They've gone through all of those transitions here over the last 10 years in some shape or form. They've found a battery now with Lovato extended, Whelan extended, and the 3-year deal. Orzik. I said Rick Lovato.
Yeah.
Why did I say Rick Lovato?
Your brain went back a handful of years there, my friend.
A decade,
sorry,
bro.
I had to correct you live on the show here.
Rick Lovato goes past even my time with Packers.com. I hope you're doing well, Rick. I don't think he's in Philly anymore. But, Matthew Orzik, Daniel Whelan, both of those guys extended, and Brandon McManus getting his own contract. That group is together for the foreseeable future, and this is a great example of what they're capable of.
Yeah, well, we do need to turn the page to the Washington Commanders in Week 2 and Thursday Night Football. We'll do that in just a minute after we pay some bills with some words from our sponsors.
SiriusXM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. At Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50 plus years of better. Pit Boss Grills, the official grill of Packers tailgating at Lambeau or at your house. Take your game day to the next level with a Pit Boss wood pellet grill. Pit Boss Grills available at Menards.
Welcome back to Packers Unscripted West, Week 2, Thursday Night Football at Lambeau Field. It is Green Bay against Washington, yet another 2024 playoff team coming to Green Bay to face the Packers. And this Washington team coming off of a 21-6 victory at home over the New York Giants in their opener. So both the Packers and the Commanders are 1-1. And any discussion of Washington, of course, starts with the young quarterback Jaden Daniels, the high draft pick out of LSU. He led Washington all the way to the NFC Championship game a year ago, and you know, he's the guy everybody's going to have their eyes on when that ball kicks off on Thursday night.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, his performance against the New York Giants really showed again just the multitude of ways that he can beat you, and whether it is, you know, with his feet, with his arm, he's a complete football player, and there's a reason why he had all the accolades that he did his rookie season. I don't think anyone's going to confuse the New York Giants at the juncture that they're at right now with where the Packers are at.
Right.
But that being said, Washington's going to be a team that is going to stress Green Bay on both sides of the ball. I thought Dan Campbell's defense had a magnificent showing and again against the Giants in that game. New York could not run the ball. And Russell Wilson, we just got done talking about how Jared Goff basically had to turn into just checkdowns and high percentage throws. That was Russell Wilson for the entirety of that game against Washington, just complete fits all over the place. Conversely, Washington has a number of different running backs they can turn to. Deebo Samuel now is in that offense and was a featured target in that win over the Giants, and Terry McLaurin with his new contract. You know, he's the guy. So they've built this thing up around Jaden Daniel, but the crazy thing about it is it's a very old football team. They have a young quarterback and a very veteran team around him. So it's an interesting little paradox for where they're at.
Yeah, it's a little bit different mix of offensive weapons in year 2 here for Daniels, because Terry McLaurin is back. They have tight end Zach Ertz. They have kind of the all-purpose weapon in Austin Eckler out of the backfield. But you mentioned Deebo Samuel is in the mix for them now, and he got a rushing touchdown off of an end around against the Giants. And then a new rookie running back, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, if I'm saying that correctly. He's the guy they're now turning to with Brian Robinson Jr. having left the Commanders after last season. So it is a different mix of guys on offense. Defensively for Dan Quinn, it starts with those two linebackers, Wagner and Luvu, in the middle of the field. Now Washington's run defense last year was a liability for them for a good portion of the year. I can't remember exactly where they ended up ranked. I know it wasn't very high. It was toward the bottom of the league, if I remember correctly. But you said it. They seem to have fixed a little bit of their run defense. I think the Packers will challenge that run defense a bit more with Josh Jacobs. The Giants, they just never got anything going offensively, and they're already hollering in New York about ending the Russell Wilson era and turning to the rookie Jackson Dart at quarterback because that performance was so frustrating. Whatever the case might be there, but this is a Washington team that was. They were the playoff surprise. They were the underdog, the Cinderella, whatever you want to call them last year. That they were one of the last two standing in the NFC before Philadelphia beat them and then went on to win the whole thing. So this is a Washington team now that's not going to surprise anybody.
No.
But it's a team that believes in what Dan Quinn is doing and where they're going. And for a week 2 showdown, this is a pretty big one here at Lambeau.
It's a huge showdown, by all means. By the way, Washington was 30th in rushing.
30th in run defense last year.
So there's that information.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate
you're welcome.
that.
Happy to provide it. So many different ways to take this. First and foremost, this is a Washington team that feels like it should be competing for a Super Bowl this year. I think they feel like they were really close last year. They took a lot of people by surprise, but they almost were kind of like the Packers in 2023, where I think when they got down the stretch and you saw the type of quarterback Daniels was, that they could challenge right off the bat with the makeup of that roster. Dan Quinn going in there, a guy with a lot of pelts on the wall, somebody that had a lot of success as a head coach in this league, kind of had to reinvent himself a little bit with a good defense in Dallas, built around Micah Parsons for the last 3 years in his case. All these things have come into terms, but I think the secret sauce, honestly, for Washington was the fact that they got Cliff Kingsbury. And Kingsbury, it did not work out for him really as a college head coach or the Arizona Cardinals head coach.
Right.
But this is one of the premier offensive minds of this game, off of that Mike Leach coaching tree and the air raid and everything that he does. It was the perfect style of offense with Jaden Daniels. Now, can you build upon that? Can you take that next step? That's the challenge for them this season. But it's an exciting football team. And when you're talking about Thursday night football, where it sometimes can just be roll the ball out there and see how this thing looks, the Arizona Cardinals are built for that kind of matchup. So part of me is a little bit sad that it has to be this way. I'm glad it's a primetime matchup. Everyone's going to be able to have a chance to see it. But this would have been a great Sunday night football, Monday night football game. You know, when you get the full preparation week, sometimes historically those Thursday night games have been, a 10 or 15 win team against a 3-win team a lot of times. This is a great matchup for week 2 football, but there's just so many variables to it.
Yeah. Well, keys to victory for Green Bay. For me, the best way I can crystallize it or sum it up in my mind is I think the 2 keys to victory are one thing that the Packers did really well against Detroit, and then one thing they would like to do better. The one thing they did really well against Detroit, obviously, was they just didn't allow any big plays. And I think that has to continue against Washington. Now, there's a different way you have to do it because of Jaden Daniels and his threat in terms of the off-schedule plays and being able to run, make plays out of the pocket, get first downs with his legs, all of that kind of stuff. But keeping a lid on the big plays, that'll work against any team in this league and give you a really good chance to win. And on the other side, I was talking about Washington's run defense being, struggling for them last year. I don't think the Giants really challenged them in that regard. And the Packers did get off to obviously a slow start with the running game against the Lions because Detroit was really selling out to stop the run. It would be great to see Josh Jacobs get going early in this game and for Green Bay to really establish that from the get-go. So those are the 2 things that jump out at me as far as keys to victory.
I thought one of the things we didn't talk about in the first segment, but is going to be very important for Green Bay this season, is giving Jordan Love the amount of time in which he had to work with on Sunday.
Yeah, the pass protection. It wasn't just the running backs that we were talking about. The pass protection for Jordan Love on Sunday against the Lions was absolutely outstanding. He was bouncing on both feet there in the pocket, surveying the field on a number of throws, and you'd love for that to continue. Obviously.
If the tongue's out and he's bouncing in the pocket, good things are going to happen for the Packers offense.
Right.
But the reason I bring that up, Tucker Kraft was saying after the game, I mean, there are some good pass rushers for Washington. They may not have that, Micah Parsons type guy. I mean, obviously Von Miller has the name, but I mean, he's an older player now. But, you look at like Frankie Louvu. I mean, this is one of the great stories in the National Football League. A guy that was an undrafted free agent that had kind of claw his way up the depth chart and then finally becomes a second-team All-Pro in Washington and now is becoming one of their faces of that franchise. We'll have to see, as you talked about early on, what this offensive line looks like for Green Bay. If you don't have Zach Tom available here on this short week, that is a significant loss. He's arguably the best right tackle in the game right now. Just watch the film of when he was on the field last week against Detroit.
Yeah.
And what he was doing, shutting down Hutchinson and company. Now, if he's not out there, now you have a guy potentially in Darian Kennard who's been here sort of like Malik Willis last year.
He's been here a couple weeks.
A matter of weeks that potentially could be in that spot, or Anthony Belton, however they sort it out. Be that as it may, there's a reason why Zach Tom got the contract that he did. And for as much rotation as they've done with Jordan Morgan, most of it's been at the guard spots and left tackle. So that's the one thing to watch in this matchup, is if Green Bay can give Jordan Love that type of pocket to work with again, because last week it showed what he can do with it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, I wish we had more time to talk about the other results in week 1. I'll just throw a couple of things out there, and if you want to say something, you can. Otherwise, we can make life easier on our producer, Hannah, and get the heck out of here. But
I got a couple things to say, Hannah. I'm sorry. Wherever you're at, I'm sorry, Hannah. I'm going to talk for a minute.
But we saw a couple of quite frankly ridiculous comebacks with the Buffalo Bills coming back to beat the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday Night Football, and then the Minnesota Vikings in Chicago coming back to beat the Bears. I will just say this, that those games are a reminder of how important it is to be able to finish a game in this league. The Baltimore Ravens, they dominated the Buffalo Bills for 3.5 quarters in Buffalo, but they couldn't finish the deal. And the Chicago Bears are playing at home with their new head coach in the first game and all this, and they dominated the Minnesota Vikings for 3 quarters, but they couldn't put them away. They couldn't finish the deal. And there isn't that much of a difference in talent, in ability, in most of the teams in this league. If you are not able to put somebody away, they will take you to the wire.
Yep.
And anybody that can take you to the wire can beat you.
Yes.
And we saw that happen in both of those primetime games the last couple nights.
You and I have talked ad nauseum about the Bills and Ravens. We previewed it last week and certainly added some really unique anecdotes and factoids with that victory and that comeback fashion that the Bills had.
Crazy.
But what I want to focus on is the Minnesota Vikings, because I thought J.J. McCarthy showed something in the second half.
Well, there's no doubt he did.
There was a point in that game, Michael, where they had negative yet net passing yardage. There was a stat that people were throwing out there that if he would have just dirted the ball every single time, they would have had more passing yardage than what they had through the first 2 quarters, I believe it was. The young man responded. And it's always interesting when you see guys who are trying to learn on the fly, which is what the Vikings are committed to this season with McCarthy.
Yeah.
He made the adjustments, and you can see why this guy has been a winner at every level that he's played this game. And the Chicago Bears, to your point, gave them way too much breathing room, in addition to compounding some errors at the end. The Minnesota Vikings showed why they were a team that surprised a lot of people last year. While I felt like a lot of the window dressing has changed in Chicago, they still found a way to lose a game in a similar fashion to the Matt Eberflus era, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I saw a statistic that the Bears have now lost 4 games in the last 4 years in which they had a double-digit lead in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be incredibly frustrating for their fans. And that game last night, there is not a soul in America who thought at the end of the third quarter that the Bears, especially playing at home, that they were going to let that one get away with their new head coach in his first game, and they did. You have to be able to finish games in this league. That's why, Packers are up 17-6. Rashawn Gary getting a sack by the goal line, and then the offense taking the good field position, pounding the ball into the end zone. That's how you finish a team off in this league, and neither the Ravens nor the Bears were able to do that. It made for some incredibly entertaining football, but a couple of pretty incredible gut punch losses for a couple of teams to start their season.
And if I may say this too, we didn't get a chance to watch it because of us getting ready for our own game, but I did go back and watch a lot of the clips of the Steelers-Jets matchup. He's not the old gunslinger, but he is the old general.
Yeah.
And Aaron Rodgers put on a vintage performance in that. Many years ago, when people were asking me about Rodgers playing into his 40s, I remember saying the 2014 season, the end of it, even though obviously everyone thinks about how it ended, the way that Rodgers had to play with the calf injury is what gave me confidence that he was going to be able to play deep into his career, because when he was stationary in the pocket, he could still operate. Not the same type of player, but he could still operate in a lot of ways that most quarterbacks can't. He was cerebral in this game, and he maximized the talent of the playmakers around him. And when you look at Aaron Rodgers' history, that's what he's known for. Now, obviously, he was going to be motivated going back into that stadium, facing that opponent. But it gave me a feeling again that this guy still has something left in the basement.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I'll say one last thing on week 1, too. It was a reminder for everyone out there how important it is to have a kicker in this league.
Yeah.
Because Cleveland's young kicker, that $5 million kicker in Atlanta, and then you look at Chris Boswell, the Pittsburgh. Did you hear what Mike Tomlin said about him after the game? Called him a serial killer. Said he's got the low pulse rate of a serial killer. Wow. 60-yarder on the road to get Aaron Rodgers that victory. Man, I tell you, there is there is no overstating the value of a clutch, reliable kicker in this league.
And Boswell to do that at this juncture of his career too.
Yeah.
I mean, he is not a young kicker now. He's been in Pittsburgh a long time.
Well, and even just, Minnesota's kicker hitting that 59-yarder at the end of the first half when the Vikings had nothing going for him. Those 3 points turned out to be pretty big. And McCarthy even mentioned after the game, J.J. McCarthy, of course, that the pass that he hit to set up the long field goal right at the end of the first half, he felt that was the play that kind of got him going. He went into the locker room feeling like, yeah, all right, I can do this. We can win this game kind of thing. And if Will Reichard misses that 59-yarder at the end of the first half, who knows where the Vikings' heads are as they go into the locker room there at Soldier Field. So.
And then look at Matt Prater too, right?
That's right.
He didn't have to make a 59-yarder or any of those, but this is a guy that had to come in last minute. 41 years old, kind of got tossed to the side by Arizona, and still making things happen.
Yeah, he has to fill in for Tyler Bass in Buffalo, and then he gets carried off the field by his teammates. With
Rudy.
Wow. What a week 1, and week 2 is already upon us. Packers and Commanders on Thursday Night Football at Lambeau Field. We got to sign off on this edition of Packers Unscripted, but be sure to continue to follow all of our coverage of the team and everything from the big game against Washington. We'll have it for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I'm Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.